My name is Smith, and shortly after I turned 30, I started making like some real money, like not strike it rich money, but pocket money. I had a decent amount of pocket money, and but the thing is that it came from my first job that was in a corporate environment. So even though I was eating better food and buying fancy things like DVD players and wearing shirts, and also buying shirts that looked much better when you tucked them in. But because of the job, I was feeling very empty and hollow inside. And I was like, wow, this is really what they say about money. So I had this empty, hollow feeling. And since I had stopped doing drugs around this time, I decided to start taking night classes. Oh my God, that is so not where I expected a laugh. But I can work with this. I can. I'm a professional. Up until this point, I had been an entertainment journalist for about 10 years. The job I had at that time was in television. I was writing scripts for daytime programs at as part of a music video network. Writing is actually a really generous term for what I was doing. I was actually more of a word processor. I would put in words like, how's it going? And welcome back. And up next. And don't touch that dial, which actually got a red line through it. And the producer looked at me and was like, that's really cliche. And I was like, okay. So I said, well, how about don't go anywhere? And he was like, that's great. And I was like, I have a gift. You guys are lucky to have me. I always imagined myself as a novelist. That's what my mother always told me. In high school, she'd see me reading like a John Irving novel, and she'd say, you're going to move to New York and you're going to become a famous novelist. And I was like, okay. And I actually did move to New York. I went to NYU to go to college. And suddenly, I went to NYU in college in 89, and then suddenly it was 2001. And I was like, why aren't I a famous novelist? And I'm like, Mom, you didn't tell me that in order to become a famous novelist, you have to do things like write, So I decided that I was going to go take a bunch of writing courses and hopefully get those juices flowing. I signed up for a series of classes at the New School in New York. I signed up for one called Writing Fiction. But all we did was these like single-page exercises, and at the end of it, I was like, this isn't going to turn me into a novelist. So then I signed up for a class called Beginning the Novel. And I actually did begin a novel, but it was one that I thought completely sucked. So then I signed up for a class called Unblocking Your Writer's Block. And the teacher was this very strange man. Like all he did, the only trick he seemed that he seemed to think would unlock this was to have us write down stories that were only 250 words long. And after doing that for like several weeks, I just stopped going. I was like, I don't understand this at all. Around this time, I had a lot of friends who were actors and comedians and stuff. And one of them said to me, what's really, really good for writers is taking an improv comedy class because, it really helps to uncork really good dialogue. And so I signed up for an improv class. It wasn't really my thing because improv, like in order to be really good at improv comedy, you have to be like, a good listener and a team player. And like, I just didn't have time for that. So then I thought, oh, well, wait a minute, stand-up comedy. It's just me up there. It's all about me, I don't have to because if you're an improv, you can't just barge into like a scene or something and make a face and then like, fart and, because then you're just going to spoil it for everybody. It's like a group thing. And it was great because it's stand-up. You can just totally fart and everyone loves it. No, I'm just kidding. That's bad stand-up. Come on, guys. But I actually, I actually excelled at stand-up. I was really, not to brag, but like I was pretty good at it. And I actually was a little nervous about getting up on stage, but I quickly found that I was very comfortable up there. Like as soon as people laughed, I was like, I can get with this. And my teacher actually put, for the graduation show, he put me in I closed the show, I headlined. There was other students in class, but whatever, but I was the headliner. And then I actually was a part of like a local competition, and I qualified for this competition, and all of my friends suddenly started sounding like my mom. They were like, "You're going to have your own special on Comedy Central someday." And so I started to give it, I started to, as I started to do more of the comedy, like I would go to local comedy clubs, and then suddenly I was finding myself like standing at like these local dive bars at like midnight on weekdays, like standing before really like questionable crowds. And like suddenly I was just like, why? Like, wasn't I going to be Kurt Vonnegut? Like, why am I suddenly standing in front of a room full of drunk, single white males and trying to impress them when all I have to do is just say the word penis and they lose their shit? You see, there's a few of them here. And so I just kind of stopped doing the comedy because I wasn't into it anymore. And it just, for me, it was like the comedy was another thing of aborted attempts at trying to make something of myself in my 30s. So I stopped. Amidst all of this, my partner and I moved from New York to Maine. And my partner's like a very type A kind of problem solver guy. And he sensed that I was, really depressed. And so, the way he tried to fix it was by giving me books with titles like Getting Things Done and The Now Habit and The Skinny Rules. See, I was eating a lot of my feelings at this time. So, and, he also noticed that I was playing around with my camera a lot. And he suggested that I sign up for a photography class at Maine Media Workshops over in Rockport. And so it was a week-long class. By the end of the week, I was completely obsessed with taking pictures. And the thing about photography is that if you're going through like a pre-midlife crisis, that it really lends itself to a lot of bad metaphors. Like I felt something inside of me click. And it was as if there was some undiscovered space inside of me that was being exposed. And it was as if I was beginning to see the light. And there was a talent in me that I was developing. Anyway, I'll stop. All right, come on. And, the thing is that I never went to the camera to like immediately try and create some masterpiece, There was nobody in my life that was saying, you're going to be a famous photographer, someday. Because let's face it, like photographers just don't get famous anymore. They certainly don't get rich anymore. And I only went to the camera to pick it up because it's like, I just thought it was fun. And unlike writing, even to this day, like I can write a paragraph and when I'm done with it, I can easily convince myself that it's the worst paragraph that's ever been written. And like, why do I even bother? And then I'll just walk away. Like writing is very hard for me. But if I felt like I took a bad picture, like I'd just take another one and then another one and then another one. And it was like fun and fearless, which was something I hadn't really experienced in life before. So after about 2 years of just taking pictures, I decided I wanted to learn all I can about photography. And so I went to SALT. And then after SALT, I applied to the International Center of Photography in New York, and I was accepted. And And so I went to New York for 5 months. And on the first day of school, I realized, oh my God, I'm totally the oldest student in this entire student body. And at the first class, the 19-year-old who was seated next to me got up and he put a picture that he had taken and he put it up on the wall. And he said, "This is from my latest project. It's autobiographical. It's a series about fading youth." I was like, fading youth. You want to see fading youth? Take your camera to my place on the weekend. It's very sad. And I was the biggest, oh my God, like being a full-time student again was such a huge luxury. It was like, I was the most gigantic geek student you could possibly imagine. I went to every class. I did all of the homework. I read every handout. And like in history class, like even history class, while all of my classmates are like nodding off around me, I'm sitting there like bolt upright, like Tracy Flick, like. And, it was just really exciting. And at one point, like a teacher actually sent out an email and said, "I'm sorry, guys, I have to actually cancel this week's class." And I replied like really like firmly. I was like, I signed up for a 5-week course, not a 4-week course. So I'm assuming you are going to let us know when the makeup session is. Meanwhile, all the kids on Facebook are like, "No school today." And the thing is that like, a lot of like my classmates were a lot like me when I was in college the first time around. They showed up late for class constantly. When they did show up, they didn't do the homework. And when their work wasn't scheduled for critique, they wouldn't even show up. And so I was inevitably, very parental, and like I would sort of, I wouldn't take them aside, but I'd be like, you actually get just as much out of this by being present and discussing other people's work as you do hearing people discuss about your work. I'm like, it's kind of a team thing, It's like we're all here for each other and we support each other, It's kind of like improv class. I'm like, improv class. So, shit. I am having such a Cindy Brady moment right now. Hold on. I'm sorry, guys. Sorry. This happens to me once whenever I do this, which is so often. Cindy Brady moment. Okay. All right. You will let us know. Supporting each other. Improv class. Okay. And then on something unexpected happened. Y'all didn't see that. Something unexpected happened. Like, I guess through all the presentations I gave and everything, like all of these kids started coming up to me and saying, like, "You're a really good writer. I want you to look at this thing I've written." And I'm like, "I'm not a good writer. What are you talking about?" But they all kind of thought I was this really good writer. And as the program was nearing the end, they all had to prepare these artist statements. And they were like, "Help me write my artist statement." And artist statements are usually supposed to be really short and sharp. And they were handing me like these pages and pages of just like these long, rambly, pretentious meanderings. And I was like, "Look. First, I was like, take this back and go home and just cut it down. Cut it down till it's short. Like, cut it down to like maybe like, 250 words. And then, so then as we're like getting near like graduation time, it was like, okay, now it's time for you guys to vote like, a commencement speaker. And suddenly everybody voted, and then like I got this email from like the program director saying like, well, they've chosen you as their commencement speaker. And I'm like, what? And it was like right after this, I got like my final report card, and it was like all A's. Like I got all A's for the entire year, like, except for one A-, which I still have an issue with. And so it was all A's, and I was like, oh my God, wait a minute. I was like, for someone who like totally was unpopular and kind of stupid in high school, for the first time in my life, not only am I a straight A student, but they just elected me homecoming queen. So as I'm writing like It was really, really strange. As I started to write my speech, I realized that all of my years of journalism experience and all of the writing classes that I had taken helped me write a really good speech. And all of the comedy classes that I had done and I had taken had made me a really confident public speaker. And as I was sitting at the graduation ceremony, I was like, oh my God, like everything that I've done, excuse me, I'm not breathing. Forget that part when I said I was a confident public speaker. That was a lie. I'm just going to exhale. Like I just had this moment where it was like, everything that I've done in life has led to this actual moment here. You know, my life is not a series of failed loose ends. It's all led to right now. And I walked up onto that stage and I totally I don't mean to brag and boast and everything, but I fucking killed it. I totally fucking killed it. Like afterwards, the program director came up to me and she was like, that's the best speech I've ever heard a student give ever. And then a year later, the chairperson of the whole institution saw me at like some school function and he came up to me and he was like, you know, I actually just started that job when I heard your speech and it really encouraged me and made me feel like I was in the right place at the right time and that this job was the job for me. And I was like, oh my God, you know? So it was like totally crazy to think that like, you know, somehow like going to photography school made me feel like a good writer. So isn't that weird? So at this point in my life, I'm really, really, really excited for whatever else is going to come along that's going to make me feel like a good photographer. So thank you guys.